Hey, how you doing, girl? Today is the 13th of April, 2019, and I just wanted to say hi. How are you doing? Um, I had a really good time this last weekend, and I wanted to talk to you a little bit about it. I went to my 30-year high school reunion at Del Norte High School in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and it was so nice to go visit all kinds of friends and acquaintances that I had made during my high school period. About 40 other folks showed up, and that number, I think, is the total number. So that means, I guess, that there were maybe like 30 or so high school students that showed up, and then their children and spouses showed up as well. And that totals the remainder. Actually, that's the remaining people of the 40 were sort of close family of the people who showed up. And so it was so nice to see a lot of those faces again. Um, I guess I'll just start at the beginning, and that was just the planning. I did actually not very much planning for this trip. I think what I did decide is that I wanted to drive out there instead of fly out to Albuquerque, New Mexico, to Del Norte High School. And the reason is because I just wanted to get a compare contrast perspective on the two ways of getting out to Albuquerque, New Mexico, because I usually travel out there to New Mexico every May. And I've considered traveling to New Mexico a couple of different ways, like through the car or on an airplane or using the bus or a train. And, actually, that's actually kind of an interesting point. I haven't really taken a bus ride out there for, wow, a long, long time. I guess I could give the bus a try. I might find it's better for some reason. You know what? I'm just thinking about something. It does take a lot of hours to get down there. For example, I think it's a 14-hour drive when driving. And if I took, say, a Greyhound bus, it might be like 24, 26 hours. It might be a day and a half. But the nice thing about that whole thing is that I'm not driving. And you know what? It's kind of like a direct route. So I might not get a lot of sleep one night, but I'm thinking it might be worth it because the cost is so low. I think it might be, I don't know how much Greyhound charges to drive someone from Lompoc to Albuquerque, New Mexico, but I could give that a try because they've got Wi-Fi on those buses. And since I don't have to drive, um, that also might be good for me. Actually, when I tend to drive, one thing I noticed is that I kind of my brain gets bored on the drive. It's very understandable because my brain basically for 12 hours has to focus on just the traffic, which is kind of dull. Certainly during when you're driving through Mojave, the Mojave Desert, which is essentially not a whole lot of landscape. And, my brain gets tired. And so when my brain is bored, it wants to snack on stuff. So I did try snacking on veggies and fruits and things like that. But very quickly, my snacking went to like potato chips and pretzels and other things. I really tried to put a cap on the foods that I was eating, so that I wouldn't just go totally overboard. It's so easy to go overboard. So I was getting like lower calorie popcorn snacks and things like this. I was getting bean dip that didn't have any added fat, and just trying to keep the calories low as I was snacking because I don't know. It's a real challenge when I'm driving long distances not to do snacking. And I can do vegan style snacking and take in a lot of calories. There's nothing else to do. Um, so anyway, I was talking about Greyhound, and I think Greyhound might be an option that maybe I can try next May. Yeah, maybe I'll give Greyhound a try. I think I'm going to try a lot of different ways to get down there, either through a train or through Greyhound. Those are options that I haven't tried yet. I don't know. Maybe a train will work. I don't know. I want to figure out a way that is easy and comfortable. Taking a plane is great. I love that the plane ride is usually only like 2 hours long, but there's a problem with the plane, and that is having to rent a car when I show up in Albuquerque or in New Mexico. That can be kind of an expensive thing. There's also the thing about the flights, the flight timing. Sometimes logistically, there are only like two flights out of LA, and often there are no direct flights. And all that, while that's not so much of a problem, um, sometimes the arrival times and departure times are just weird. And sometimes there are delays, and hanging out inside of airports for hours on end is just no fun. Yeah. Although I do find that I eat less, that I'm able to maintain my calories better when I travel on an airplane for some reason. I'm not sure why that is. So yeah, I'm trying to figure out new ways to get out there and get back. I did. Here's the thing about driving long distances. It's kind of rough on the body. It's rough on your physical body to just sit in a chair driving for 14 hours at a time. For me, it took me about, 2 full days to get there. Essentially that's 7 hours of driving. Optimistically, it's 7 hours of driving for 2 days. But sometimes it's not 7 hours. Sometimes it's 12 hours because of issues related to traffic, and mostly it's traffic, especially when I'm driving through Los Angeles. I might want to try going through using a different route. Maybe not using LA. Maybe I can go up to Santa Maria and do Route 166, something like that, just to make sure that I'm traveling the shortest distance that I can, and taking into consideration the traffic that might show up down in Los Angeles. Yeah. So, yeah, it was interesting. It's been a long time since I've driven that far before. Usually, um, usually I don't drive 7 hours a day. Usually I just drive 2 or 3 hours and that's it. 7 hours is just wow. It's just a lot of driving. And one beneficial thing about the drive is that I was able to watch or listen to the Harry Potter audiobook. I got almost all of it done, which is nice. One thing which I think is kind of funny is that when I drive, um, I'm not always interested in just listening to audiobooks on the way there. A lot of the time, I would prefer to listen to music or maybe even have silence. Yeah. And that's kind of interesting. I just go with the flow there. I'm not sure how my brain wants to spend its time, but um, sometimes my brain just wants to snack, or have like a little. One thing I did an experiment on while I was traveling was that I was choosing, say, whether I liked to eat or to eat gum or sort of have mints in my mouth. So whether it was gum or mints, that was a choice. And it turned out that I prefer to have mints around. And it's kind of funny how I sort of gamified the whole traveling to Albuquerque, New Mexico thing. So yeah, it was all about this comparison. Do I like gum or mints better? And it turns out that I like mints better. And I also did some exploration about what kind of mints I like the most. So I bought some Altoids, I bought some icebreakers, I bought some other varieties of mints. Turns out icebreakers are good. Oh, I don't like Mentos. Turns out I don't like Mentos. And see, something that I really like are the Altoids. I'm a big Altoids fan. I had no idea. I've tried different kinds of Altoids too. Like I had 14 hours. I was probably more than that. It was probably more like 20 hours of driving. When you factor in things like brakes and getting gasoline and walking around like rest stops and things like that. So yeah. Um, so yeah, I found out that the kind of Altoids I like the most are I find out that the kind of Altoids I like the most are cinnamon. Cinnamon is my favorite flavor. At least I like it more than peppermint. And you know what? I did not try wintergreen on this trip. So I'm going to have to do a comparison between wintergreen and cinnamon in the future for Altoids. We'll see how that goes. um, I was surprised that I didn't quite like Mentos. Mentos peppermint flavor is just not a sweet peppermint. Turns out I like sweet peppermint. It can't be sort of a uh, dry, even powerful, bitter peppermint. It's got to be a sweet peppermint. Who knew? Who knew that I had a preference like that? I also wanted the peppermint flavor to be really complex, and I think partly the Altoid peppermints won out because they just seem to have a very complex and powerful flavor. I did prefer the Altoid peppermint over the Mentos peppermint and the Icebreakers peppermint. Yeah. As you can tell, I did a lot of thinking about gum versus mints. And let me tell you about the reason why I didn't like gum. There was one particular reason I didn't like gum, and actually, there were a couple. One of the main reasons I don't like gum is that the flavor dissipates pretty quickly. Even in flavors like extra, and I mean, the flavors are good and they continue for a long time. Longer. I think I like extra gum for that reason. But I don't know. There's another reason about why I don't care for the gum. And that is because in order to really get the most out of gum, you're chewing. And the fact is, me chewing for an hour or 2 hours hurts my jaw muscles. So I'm not into that. I was having sore jaw muscles after hours and hours of chewing gum. And of course, I know the solution to that is just to chew gum for less often, you know, for less time. Though I had basically 20 hours of time on the road that I needed to spend. And anyway, I did want to do, I did feel compelled to do a lot of gum chewing, and I didn't like how sore my jaw muscles were after that. So let's see what else went on. Yeah, thinking of snacks on the ride, I actually did a few other experiments. One of them, which I'm quite proud of, was, you know, sometimes I want to get a snack, but the snacks that are available are just not very healthy. This is a problem. I want to have healthy snacks. I want to have healthy, low calorie, high fiber snacks with lots of antioxidants, ideally, lots of vitamins. And it's just hard to find them at, say, gas stations and places like that. So I tried a veggie tray. Like, those veggie trays that you get at grocery stores in the uh, produce department. Yeah, I tried a veggie tray, and that worked out really well. In fact, it worked out great. I just, you know, I opened the tray by peeling off the plastic layer on top, and then I had all these tomatoes, broccoli, snap peas, carrots, just available for me to snack on while I was on the road. And that worked out really well. And I'm going to start using that more often. I also did something else. I got a fruit plate, like a fruit tray, a plate of fruit. That did not work. Even despite me having a fork and having the fruit close by, the problem with the fruit was that, first of all, it was kind of drippy. Like the fruit tray had watermelon, cantaloupe, honeydew, pineapple, things like that, grapes and such. The problem with that is, like I mentioned, it was kind of drippy, and I would stab it with the fork, say a cube of the melon, and it would drip on its way to my mouth. There was also another problem. I couldn't, like, sometimes I had to look over and stab a melon cube, and I didn't like paying like that second of attention away from looking at the road. So that was kind of interesting. So I found that I don't really care for fruit plates. And here's another thing. Fruit sometimes tastes a little off. It just does. Like, for some reason, the watermelon tasted a little bit off, and the cantaloupe tasted fine. The honeydew tasted fine, but the watermelon tasted a little off. So I didn't eat all of my watermelon. There we go. So there were issues with the fruit plate, but the veggie plate worked out great. What was great about the veggie plate is I could just throw my hand over and pick up a nice handful of cherry tomatoes and just eat the cherry tomatoes as I was driving down the road. I could also do that with carrots. I could take just a big old handful of carrots and just start chomping on them. So, so long as I have, say, a passenger seat available, or if my passenger is willing to carry a veggie tray while I'm driving, that's pretty cool. So I'm really excited about learning about how a veggie tray can assist me in snacking more healthy as I'm traveling long distances on the road. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the reunion itself. Okay, so I got to Albuquerque, New Mexico, slept at my brother's house, and eventually the whole thing started with a tour of the Del Norte High School campus. Now, this is a campus that I was in 30 years ago, and I was in high school for 4 years, like everybody. Like, you're in high school. You'll be in high school, maybe for another 3 more years, right? In the one that you're in at Cabrillo High School. And you know what I'm finding? For some reason, I am speaking and I'm a little bit out of breath right now. What is that all about? Maybe I'm just excited to talk to you about this. I don't know. So, the whole reunion started with a tour in the afternoon, or actually around lunchtime. And we got walked around by one of the faculty at Del Norte High School. And in fact, interestingly enough, that faculty member was a prior student at Del Norte High School. And I think that faculty member was also, he also graduated with our class of 1989. So what do you know about that? That's pretty incredible. First, I was just blown away by all the changes that had occurred to my high school over the last 30 years. Spellbinding changes. So many differences in the high school. In fact, the high school really wasn't even recognizable to me. Could not recognize it. I did not know where to park. I didn't know where the classes were. I didn't know where the administration building was. There were even like like tennis courts. They changed their look. In fact, I didn't even remember that there were tennis courts at the high school. Um, yeah, everything was totally changed. So much change, completely unrecognizable. The only thing that was recognizable was, our school colors, which were turquoise and black. They were prominently displayed all throughout the high school. But pretty much it was brand new high school. Uh, yeah. Now, there were a few interesting things about the walk down of the high school, and I think one of the most interesting things this is a psychological perspective, is it seemed like the high school was smaller than I remember. Even the gym. So I was looking. We took a tour of the gym, and the gym was small. It was tiny compared to what I remember. I remember this huge gym, and it wasn't very big at all. I was looking. I was basically, the gym is essentially like the basketball courts, right? With the bleachers. The bleachers that got changed out. They used to be wooden bleachers, and now they are like this plastic material. Someone made a comment that the basketball floors had been replaced. Um, there used to be like a big center speaker that was in the center of the gym that had been removed. Um, I don't know. We did take a look at some of the classrooms. I was really amazed at the new classrooms. Totally a new construction. It was a structure that was 3 stories high. It was a building, and it had lots of classrooms in it. Amazingly outfitted with wonderful classrooms. Beautiful on the inside. I took a look through the glass and saw what the biology science lab looked like. I could see the stations in each of the desks, uh, uh, or I guess on the tables where the lab students sat, and they had awesome like chemistry. Let's see, I guess they're laminar flow, like a laminar flow bench, also called a hood, like a chemistry hood. Those were amazing, and I saw all the new computers that the students had. It's kind of funny. 30 years ago, we were lucky. At least I felt lucky to have computers at all in our high school. Thankfully, there was a computer lab in my high school, and in fact, I even took some programming classes. I think I took Pascal for 2 semesters. So, did I take it for 2 semesters or one? I may have just taken it for 1 semester. I'm not sure. I think I did take. I took Fortran in college. Yeah, I don't think I took Pascal in college. I'm trying to remember if I took just 1 semester of Pascal or 2 semesters. I think I might have just taken 1 semester of Pascal. I had also taken many, many years prior to that a class in basic programming. This is when I was like in 5th or 6th grade, maybe 7th grade. So, or maybe it was later. Maybe it was like 7th grade. Yeah, yeah. Um, maybe it was 8th grade. Actually, you know what? It may have even been 9th grade. It might have been 9th grade that I took that basic class. I took it outside the school curriculum. I took it as a summer class. Yeah, that's sounding right to me right now. I think it was 9th grade that I took a basic programming class. So that was cool. Lots of great facilities. Um, let's see. I actually wrote down some notes. So that because I wanted to make sure that I remembered all these things. Oh yeah, so when we were walking around the high school, one of the things I realized was just how out of the loop I was as a student at Del Norte High School. When I was freshman, sophomore, junior, senior, I was definitely out of the loop because there were so many references to things that I had no idea about during the conversations. Um, one thing I noticed was, oh, and this is natural, there were like friendships, ties of friendships. This is a group of people that I had sort of known for 4 years while I was in high school. And, I kind of thought I knew sort of what the connections were between people. And clearly, I had no idea. There were some deep connections that I wasn't aware of between people. You think that there's like these cliques or groups of people that hang out around one another. And indeed there were, but there was so much more than that. I just didn't quite realize the amount of the complex relationships that occurred in high school. One thing was there were also a lot of places that I wasn't that familiar with at all. I couldn't remember that there was ever tennis courts at the high school because I never played tennis. And while I was in high school, another thing was apparently there's this weight room where there were students, like student athletes, who did weightlifting to strengthen their bodies. And I had never even known that there was a weightlifting room. At least I don't think I knew that. There's also a wrestling room. Who knew that? I had no idea that there was a wrestling room where people wrestled. I guess maybe I did know that when I was a kid, but this is all news to me. And there were also a lot of interesting clubs that I was not familiar with that were available. Here's the thing: when I was in high school, I didn't participate. I wasn't in band, and I wasn't in sports. So right there, that put me at some disadvantage about knowing what was going on. Like I wasn't really clear on homecoming and what that was all about, what it even meant, because I did really had no connection to the football, what was going on with football or track and field. Had no connection to what was going on in the basketball world, um, and so my world, the world that I spent a lot of time in, was like the academic world. I was, I guess, pretty much. I got some feedback from one of my students, from one of my um, sort of fellow students in high school, and she said I was quiet. That was a word that she would use to describe me. And yeah, I think I really was. I was quiet. I was kind of I hung out with like the quiet nerd people. And the kind of activities that I did were like academic decathlon. I'm not sure if you're aware of what that's all about, but it's sort of like a trivia contest that involves public speaking and let's see, what else did it involve? I think it might have involved some essay writing or something like that. Um, but it was like Trivial Pursuit for high school students. And we competed against other schools. And that was a big deal to me when I was growing up. Another big deal to me too was there was another kind of trivia contest. It was called Emu. Emu? I think it was called Emu. Anyway, I was involved in that. For that program, for that competition, the trivia was relayed using computer programs, computer software. And speaking about computer software, I was also involved in a programming competition where we would go to this place and we would compete against other schools about how quickly we could say, computer program a database. or computer program an answer to a problem, like a logical problem. And we did it in whatever language we wanted to, and I think we decided to do it in Pascal. So yeah, I was in these competitions relating to very intellectual competitions, and I wasn't involved in the chess club or anything like that. I guess it was mostly just trivia. That might explain partly why I really like trivia today. I'm a big fan of like Trivial Pursuit and watching Jeopardy and things like that. I get a lot of joy out of it. So, yeah, so I found out that I was out of the loop about a lot of things. There were even things like talent night where people would get together and in a talent show format, and I had no idea that I mean, I'm sure I knew it existed, I just didn't go. And so it's kind of interesting just to notice just how out of the loop I was. I mean, a lot of people were talking about the Castells, which was a spirit club that existed back then. I mean, I saw them at the group perform at the gatherings in the gym, and but that's pretty much where I saw them. I wasn't in marching band or anything like that. So, here's the thing. My family at the time was pretty religious, and the Jehovah's Witness religion, back then anyway, was not understated when they were suggesting that kids just don't do extracurricular activities because they wanted kids to focus on um, proselytizing and keeping their minds and hearts pure, things like that. And I think that part of the reason I was such a quiet person had to do with that there was a definite social disincentive for me to uh, engage in extracurricular activities. There's another factor too. My mom was basically a single mom, and she had like 5 kids. Actually, she had 6 kids. She lost one in death while I was in high school. And so, with all that stuff going on, my mom really couldn't shuttle us from baseball practice to soccer practice to wrestling or anything like that. That was just an impossibility. And so things like extracurricular activities like that for a single mom was just not possible to us. And so I think I probably got some influence in that direction. Now, I didn't necessarily want to do those things either. You know, your brain rationalizes stuff like that. And at least my brain did. And I didn't really want to do any of that stuff. Which was kind of interesting. This also relates to religion. Because I grew up so religious, I spent a lot of time studying the Bible and studying a lot of religious publications. And so I had really good study habits. I did a lot of reading, I did a lot of research in my off time when I wasn't in high school. And so, I was quiet for that reason too, because I was such a focused Christian at the time, a young man. And so, I did a lot of research. I spent a lot of time in the library, spent a lot of time reading. And so a lot of my time was quiet time. And so that's also another reason why I was so out of the loop. Um, one thing I'm noticing is that my phone does a good job at distracting me all throughout the day. So, yeah, I was kind of out of the loop. Let's see what else. Oh, yeah. So another example of me being out of the loop is that people would go places for fun that I just did not know about. Like people would go, apparently they'd go to the drive-in and they'd have bonfires and at the drive-in. What? People would ditch class and go to the movies at a nearby movie theater. What? I never heard about this stuff. Uh, yeah, it's kind of funny. I apparently I did not know about all the people who were ditching classes, and they would ditch classes and go to the arcade across the street. And I mean, that makes a lot of sense that I wouldn't know the people who were ditching classes, that I wouldn't know the people who were smoking cigarettes under the bridge, right? Um, so there's a lot that I did not find out about. I hung around the kids who came to class every day and who spent a lot of time doing their homework. You know, I saw the valedictorian every day because he was in my honors English class for 4 years. You know, and so I was hanging out with people like that. What was nice is I did come in 33rd in my class in terms of as a rating for my GPA. That's great. But that also meant that I just wasn't exposed to a lot of what went on at high school. um, One thing I noticed when I was talking to others is that I think other people had this view of me of being very focused, and I think being very introverted and quiet and focused. And I think that that's a very true statement. It's kind of funny too because in my own mind, I had this idea that I might have even been class clown in my second grade, my second period homeroom. At least for me, I was class clownish, and I thought that I actually tended to be somewhat disturbing. I think all my jokes and things. Anyway, who knows? That might have been just my singular impression of myself that perhaps I was a class clown. But who knows? Who knows? I think when I did listen to the stories of other people, because one of the things that happened during the class reunion is that um, there were like four tables. I mentioned that there were 40 people that showed up, and there were about four, maybe five tables uh, at the meal part of the high school reunion. And they had a mic that traveled around each table, and they talked about, basically they gave each person 3, 4, 5 minutes to talk about themselves and what's been important to them over the last 30 years. A lot of people talked about their career and their relationships, and they talked about their health status, and they talked about things that they enjoy doing for fun. And one of the things that I noticed pretty quickly was that I was definitely a very focused academic student. And it was clear that after high school, when I went to college, when I made the choices that I made were just very rigorous. I got the bachelor's in physics, then I went to go get the master's in business administration, and then I went and got that certified safety professional certificate and or credential. And I've lived a life that's been really focused. It's been sort of hardcore in terms of academic performance. So if there was a theme that I would describe my life as having through high school and through college, it was just being really, really focused academically, which is great. In fact, I highly recommend that path to you, Emily. And I hope that that's a path that you can take on and enjoy, because it served me well. But there's also, I just want you to know as a caveat that there is also a part of that path which means separation from others. And anyway, so I guess what I'm suggesting is perhaps maybe more balanced, having a more balanced perspective might be helpful. But here's the thing, a lot of it I didn't have a choice for. I grew up in a really conservative household, going to, you know, doing a lot of study about religion. And I was kind of born into it. And now with the job that I have, I mean, I've been an engineer for 22 years. I'm still involved in that. I'm still 100% academically focused. I'm still taking classes at my local community college, still learning. I'm still sort of tightly wound personality. my my personality I think hasn't changed so much. I think I'm still really focused. And it's kind of interesting to get that perspective. Like, oh wow, look at these other people. They kind of noticed this perspective in me, or this part of me, when 30 years ago. And these themes have been just continuing and unfolding in the very same way over the last 30 years. It's pretty nice to get that perspective. You know, I guess what this experience at my 30-year high school reunion is teaching me is that I really ought to widen out a little bit, and maybe not say be less focused, but maybe give myself a little bit more opportunity to do things I've never done before. You know, maybe that would be traveling. Maybe it would be doing more fun activities. Maybe it'd be getting into sports, or um, going to more bonfire parties. This year, though, I've done pretty good. I've already gone to like 2 or 3 bonfires this year, and it's only August, so that's pretty good. I've also done a pretty good job this year when it's come to going to amusement parks. I've been to like 10 amusement parks this year already. I mean, I've been to the amusement park maybe 10 times this year already, easily, maybe more than that. Oh yeah, I'm thinking maybe even around 15 times. It's been a lot of amusement parking that I've been doing. So that's good. I need to keep that up. And one thing I also might want to do is, I don't know, this whole idea of being tightly wound. I like it because it gives me results. I have certain expectations for how I want my life to go. I have certain standards that I want to meet, relating to health and fitness and wellness, and just getting things done. And I don't know, it comes really natural to me. I'm really enjoying it too. It's a big part of my life that I enjoy. Anyway, let's get back to my third-year high school reunion. Um, what is interesting? Oh yeah. Oh, here's something that was kind of interesting to me. Now, it has been 30 years that it has been a long time since I've seen a lot of these people. But it turns out that, at least in my mind, in my own mind's eye, I think about my students, my friends at Del Norte of my class, as being really close. I mean, I really have this really sweet, warm sense of feeling, for these beautiful people that I know. And it's kind of funny in our conversations, as I would try to sort of, you know, gently reach out and reminisce about the past and things like that. I mean, I kind of got the sense that they were not as close of friends that I thought they were. You know, it's I don't know, it's kind of interesting where, I wasn't sure entirely that the warmth in our relationships was felt by them. Maybe they weren't expressing themselves as they wanted to, perhaps, but I kind of got I don't know, this sort of idea that, maybe I sort of was there was sort of a one-sidedness about it. And that got me to thinking about just my understanding about relationships and how projection is a strong factor in relationships. How people in relationship, whether it be friendships or romantic relationships, are always projecting onto one another. They're they're projecting their inner stuff onto the other person, onto their external reality. And I say to myself actually quite regularly that no two people have ever met each other. This is a quotation from Byron Katie, who's a self-help guru that I really enjoy listening to. That of course is an overstatement. It is an exaggeration to make a point. And the point is that, you know, there's an existential fact of separation of minds in the world. People are separate. They have what separates people's brains are their skulls, and there's air. you know, there's distance between those brains. Brains are not combined into a single brain. There's not like one mega brain that is the collective combination of all the other brains in the world. So there's this necessary separation. And because of that, thankfully, our brains all pretty much function alike, so that there's a lot of mutual understanding despite the separation, this existential separation. But the separation still exists. And so there's really at any time, there's really no absolutely shared one-to-one understanding between two people. It's always there. It's always a guess. People are always sort of guessing. I wonder what this person is doing. I wonder what this person is meaning when they say this or that. And this projection is, first of all, necessary for connection. And the connection is, it's a tentative connection. It's not firm. It's not solid. It's like a virtual connection. People are always doing their best. In fact, the perspectives really never meet. There's no overlap, right? We're always doing our best, basically throwing spaghetti at the wall, trying to guess what other people are doing and meaning. And so this one-sidedness of relationships, which happens all the time in human relationships, and there are a lot of words that relate to it in particular, like unrequited love, things like this. It is generally understood that people have separate brains and separate minds, and that people can only guess about what's going on, but it's just not apparent. I mean, I'm not reminded of it every day. Sometimes I imagine that I know other people. In fact, most of the time, I think I know other people, probably falsely. It's just that every once in a while, these reminders pop up that relationships are all about projection, And so when I went to my 30-year high school reunion, I sort of tripped over this, and it's kind of an interesting acknowledgement of the fact of projection in relationships. So that was kind of cool. Let's see, what else is going on? Oh, I did want to talk about the beautiful library. The new library that they have at the school is just amazing. It's like on the third floor or something. It's got these massive bay windows that show the Sandia Mountains, and the library is just an amazing thing. First, I'm really happy that there is a library at all in these newfangled high-tech high schools. I'm glad that books were still present. One thing I noticed was that there didn't seem to be a whole lot of books in the library. I don't know what that was all about, but there were some. There were also just amazing facilities related to this. Like they had this green screen set up for a media center classroom, um, and it had. I mean, this video, like a video production facilities, which is awesome. I did not have that growing up in high school, and I'm so glad that that exists today. And that was just an awesome example of the facilities that are there. Another example was that the chorus or vocal musicians, the vocal musicians, the voice class. Um, that class, I don't know, they just had just a really nice space for them to practice in. Um, yeah, what else? I just like the new design of the school. It seems like it was very thoughtful and strategic, that someone really put some thinking into how the class is going to work. And, these architects, I think, really did a good job putting the school together. There was another point that I wanted to make about the school improvements. Oh, so I walked through this newfangled new design of the high school, which I loved. It was brilliant. And I also walked through a section of my old high school. So there are still the bones, so to speak, of the high school that I was in still around. And then there was a corridor. In fact, that's a great word for it. It wasn't a hallway. It was a corridor. The corridor was basically the freshman hall of the old classrooms that I was in. And I walked through those too. And the contrast between my two experiences was profound. The new classrooms are so sparkly and clean and thoughtfully architected. The old classrooms were very poorly constructed. Cinder block. They smelled bad. The hallway smelled bad. The corridor smelled bad. The lighting was messed up. It was just dark, and you could tell the lighting fixtures were just thoughtlessly put up. And the feeling I got while I was in the old section of the school was just so dreary and dull. Oh, it was also echoey. There's a lot of echoes going on. So it was dark. It was echoey. Just the whole experience, it was almost like a prison cell. And what was also interesting was that the ceiling was low. So it was a corridor. And I remember at one time there were like lockers, and I remember how loud it was. And I don't know. So glad that students today have a much better place to call their school, to call home, for their school. Because let me tell you, the school that I was in was just poorly constructed. And one thing I discovered too, in conversations with other students, was that Del Norte High School is sort of in an economically lower area than the surrounding communities. This is something that I didn't quite realize or understand when I was growing up. For me, I mean, I thought that I saw an improvement in my condition, my economic condition, when I was going to Albuquerque Public Schools 30 years ago. And no doubt it was an improvement. But in a lot of ways, but my brain just did not catch sort of the economic class aspects of being a high school student. So that's good. I'm glad that I didn't have any kind of feeling of economic want arising in my mind when I was a student at Del Norte High School. But it's kind of interesting to hear people relate about how sort of our high school was at a lower socioeconomic level than neighboring high schools like La Cueva or Academy. Turns out I have never even visited those places. I'd never visited Academy, hadn't visited La Cueva High School. And, partly I had no basis for comparison, right? And when I was young, I pretty much stayed in the neighborhood that I lived in. So it's kind of interesting how I have a much broader perspective now, thankfully, as a result of meeting with my high school reunion buddies and some of the students in my class, in my class year. Um, so I've just I had a lot of realizations relating to sort of social status, realizations relating to architecture, realizations relating to relationships, realizations relating to just, I don't know. Oh, who I was growing up in high school. The fact that I was sort of quiet and introverted and things like that. So anyway, it was a really wonderful experience. I mean, I walked away from it learning a whole lot about myself, about others, in a lot of different ways. And I highly recommend, Emily, when you graduate high school and have an opportunity to go to your high school reunions, every 5 or 10 years or so after you graduate, I highly recommend you going. I understand that those people who attend high school reunions are self-selecting and that they are the persons who tend to be focused on retaining connections with other people throughout the years. And so I'm not sure if your personality type is going to find that important. It's going to find that valuable. But for me, I found it to be very valuable to reach out and connect to to the students that I went to school with in my high school class year. So anyway, speaking of high school, I know your high school is about to start up. Tomorrow is your first day of class. I just want to say that I love you and I hope you have a wonderful day as a sophomore in high school tomorrow. Okay? Talk to you later, girl. Bye-bye. I love you.